Make sure to give my dad a 5-star review.
Make sure to like and subscribe to his YouTube. Thank you for listening and enjoy the show.
I wanted to develop a new community and a new destination and an off-ramp for people who have had quietly left MAGA, those who are having doubts, and also for friends and relatives of those who have close ones still in the thrall of MAGA. For example, we do a Tuesday night support group, which is online, which we put together for friends and relatives of MAGA-identified Americans to help them navigate those strained relationships. So we created this organization as a place that is safe and supportive, and we provide services to those who are leaving MAGA and those who are having doubts, and give them a place where they can find a new community to counter the community that they had in MAGA.
Hey, welcome back to Faithful Politics Podcast. I am your political host, Will Wright, and I'm joined, as always, by your faithful host, Pastor Josh Bertram. How's it going, Josh?
Doing just fine, Will. Thank you. I had my mute on and then forgot, like always.
No worries. Hey, our guest today is Rich Logis. He's the founder of Leaving MAGA. He began supporting Donald Trump in 2015 as a political independent who felt estranged from both major parties. Trump to him looked like a disruptor that he's been waiting for, and he eventually even became like a MAGA pundit, wrote op-eds, did his own podcast, all kinds of stuff. But there was something that changed, what we're going to get into, that made him want to actually form an organization called Leaving MAGA, where he's helping other people escape this community that may not necessarily have their best interests at heart. So I just want to welcome you to our show, Rich. Welcome to Faithful Politics.
Thanks, guys. Good to be with you. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, we are super excited to have you. And I guess before we get into some of the questions, I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit more about Leaving MAGA. Like, what is Leaving MAGA?
Sure. And let me just preface by saying, as I like to do in my conversations, as is customary, I want to apologize for my past MAGA activism. When I was in MAGA, what I found was a community. And I had feelings of gathering and belonging and camaraderie. I had a second family. And after I left MAGA, the idea for the organization came to me because I thought there had to have been other people who also, like myself, left MAGA. And I wanted to develop a new community and a new destination and an off-ramp for people who have had quietly left MAGA, those who are having doubts, and also for friends and relatives of those who have close ones still in the thrall of MAGA. For example, we do a Tuesday night support group, which is online, which we put together for friends and relatives of MAGA-identified Americans to help them navigate those strained relationships. So we created this organization as a place that is safe and supportive, and we provide services to those who are leaving MAGA and those who are having doubts, and give them a place where they can find a new community to counter the community that they had in MAGA.
There are so many questions that come to my mind as I'm hearing you talk about this, because just even thinking about the idea that people care way more about belonging than they do about truth, even though we say we care about truth. And I think truth is obviously important and people do care about it. But it seems like a lot of us want to care about truth, but we don't want to care about truth alone. We'd rather not be alone. And so if it's either between caring about the truth or trying to find the truth or being alone, we're probably going to choose to not be alone and just stop trying to push. And so we definitely need a community. And I'm just so fascinated by this, like even that we're in this place as a country where we're literally talking about like the kinds of harm that political ideas and the political, like a political party, not even just a party, like a MAGA, like a subset of a party has caused so much pain and so much disunity, so much division and hostility between even family members. And I know this because it's happened in my own family, extended family, but it's happened in my own family. The kind of anger that people can feel about political views when someone doesn't support Donald Trump or does support Donald Trump, the kind of vitriol that is exchanged on both sides of that is pretty unbelievable. It's amazing. And how did you when you were working through this whole thing, creating this organization, how did you work through the social cost of all that? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think it is. I think it's important to best define MAGA, not as a cult, for example, but as a community of people who find that sense of purpose together. And more than and the communal aspect of this transcends any politics or ideology. I don't believe that MAGA is really about politics and ideology. It's about those feelings of belonging. And I knew that when I was going through my what I call, and I have a memoir that came out, One Betrayal Too Many, a few months ago, and I have a chapter in there called My Year of Heaven and Hell. And that's to describe the year that it took me from start to finish to realize that I had been following beliefs that turned out to be inaccurate. But I had a second family. And one of the parts that made it so excruciatingly difficult to leave MAGA is I knew that I was going to walk away from that second family. And that second family, it validated me, it acknowledged me. I felt seen, I felt heard. As embarrassed as I am to admit this, my second family oftentimes took precedence over my own blood family. And I devoted time, money, and resources to my MAGA activism that could have gone to my family and to my business. So I was unapologetically all in. I spoke at Trump groups. I was a sponsor of Trump groups. I was friendly with someone who ran a very well-known local Trump group where we would meet every month. We would break bread. We would go to holiday parties. We would go to our kids' events. It was truly like having close friends and family. And it was intoxicating, having that validation that I found from that community. But I knew that walking away, I was going to leave behind those individuals. And I consider myself, guys, very, very lucky that I left MAGA and I didn't have a place to go, but I still did it. And as a result of telling my story and being at a crossroads, it's how the organization of Leaving MAGA was born. And we're now in our third year. We have never been busier. We have 36 leaders in our who have given testimonials and given public witness to their Leaving MAGA odyssey. And I think that everyone who leaves is looking for a new community. And I'm very proud of the fact that we and our team have been able to build something where people can rediscover and reclaim their individuality and their empathy and their agency. And when you leave MAGA, you become what I like to call a born again human being. And that's how I describe it after leaving.
I'm curious on who Rich was before leaving MAGA. When you say that, you wrote op-eds, you attended meetings, you led meetings, you were basically sold out kind of for what the cause, that MAGA represented. Like what brought Rich to MAGA in the first place? Like, what were the issues? What were the things that Trump talked about that really kind of caught your attention that said, hey, I'm going to give this guy a try?
In 2015, I was somebody who was politically lonely, and I did think that the two parties were the same, and I felt that democracy had failed most Americans and that elected officials cared most about the wealthy and the powerful. And even though Trump came from that world, he ran as, and even though he ran as a Republican, when I was an independent, I was attracted to the burn it all down persona and ethos of the campaign. And I feel like Trump was correct in pointing out a lot of the corruption and the failure of elected officials to represent well their constituents. But without any government, military, or political experience, I felt that he was the right person for the job at the time. And even though I wasn't immediately enamored with the Trump campaign, as time went on, I found myself nodding more and more in agreement, especially on economic issues. You know, when he would talk about jobs that were lost to outsourcing, once vibrant communities that became hollowed out because of outsourcing. I found myself more and more in concurrence with what he was saying on the campaign trail. And I decided to work on the campaign in early 2016. And I wasn't a bigwig volunteer in any way, but I did write part of the call script for the campaign. I showed people where to get registered. I recruited people to vote for Trump, including Bernie Sanders voters. And I did all of the grassroots work that was necessary to get Trump elected. And I wish that I had been wrong in my prognostication, but I remember going on a public radio show and saying and predicting that Trump would be the nominee and would win the general election. So on election night, we were completely vindicated in this victory. You know, we had taken on the world and we were victorious in taking on the world. In fact, as somebody who's not even the most religious Catholic, I remember the night before the 2016 election, I drove to a local church. It was closed. I sat in the parking lot and I said a prayer and I said, please God, let us be victorious tomorrow. So even as I like to joke, you know, my wife hates this joke. I always say I'm an excommunicated Catholic. I think Pope Leo would welcome me though back in. I went and said a prayer and put it out into the ether that I wanted us to win, and we did. And after the victory, I got deeper and deeper into the MAGA community. I spent my own money on producing a podcast. I was an aspiring MAGA pundit. I had bylines in places like Fox and The Federalist. I wrote for a site, WorldNet Daily, which was one of the originators of the Obama birther conspiracy. And I knew that. But it was more important for me to be this patriotic, loyal soldier in what I felt was this good versus evil political battle between all of us on the side of MAGA and everybody else who were they were an existential threat to my life, my livelihood, my family, and my country. And I was the real American on the right side of history, and everybody against us, they were on the wrong side of history, and they were the fake Americans, whether they were Democrats or liberals or progressives or someone like an Adam Kinzinger who wrote the foreword to my memoir. If you were not with us 100%, we considered you 100% against us. And that militant mindset was really, in hindsight, very traumatizing, because I came to understand that when I was in MAGA, yes, it was exhilarating and enthralling and new and novel and communal. But after leaving, I realized that I had been in these perpetual states of desperation and fear and panic and paranoia, and I was addicted to the rage and the fear of being in MAGA. I was always angry at somebody or some group. I always felt there was some devilish liberal behind every tree. We used to say in our private conversations and even publicly in my writings, we would say, anyone who was, let's say, a Democratic voting Jew or Christian, they weren't a real Jew, they weren't a real Christian. This kind of dehumanizing rhetoric is the kind of language that I trafficked in. And I feel a lot of remorse for it, but at the same time, I never wanted to wallow in my regret. And it's why I decided that I needed to do something about it, which is how Leaving MAGA came to be.
You know, when people talk about the struggles that they have being addicted to fear, like I've heard this before, and I agree with you. I think it's so powerful if you can get people figure out what they're afraid of amplify that, show them examples of how that thing is happening, make it seem like it's happening all over the place all the time, give them numbers, exaggerate the numbers, knowing, well, number one, you've already cut out, like, you've already sown so much disunity and so much distrust for anything outside of your, I'm talking MAGA, right? Trump has sown so much distrust, and within that circle and ecosystem, so much distrust for legacy media, for anything that isn't them, right? That immediately, it's almost like you're dealing with the conspiracy theory person, that anything you say to them automatically, if it doesn't fit in, automatically just becomes further proof of the conspiracy, because you're trying, like, you're just trying to get them to believe something, right? That's what they would do. That's part of this conspiracy. They want us to believe this stuff. And in seeing all this stuff out there where the White House is posting things about trust Trump, like, who are they talking to? They're not talking to me. They're not talking to Rich Logis anymore. They're not talking, certainly not talking to Will Wright, that terrible bloody liberal. They're not talking to them. They're talking to someone else, right? So it's like it feels very cultish. I'm very careful because I don't want to offend my good friends that are MAGA, and I don't want to offend their intelligence or anything like that, because they're very smart people. What I'm trying to figure out is, like, how is it that this man was able to do this? That he was able to get someone such as yourself, who is intelligent, obviously very ambitious, all these things, to literally get into a place of addiction to what they were telling you. The adrenaline of here's the person to be afraid of, here's the thing to be angry about. How did this happen? How were they able to infiltrate at that level?
You know, in my memoir, I write about a they. You just said a moment ago, Josh, about them. And I write about a they. And the they were mostly Democrats, but they were trying to abridge my rights and indoctrinate my children in the public schools. And they were trying to take my guns away. They were trying to replace white people with brown people and foreigners. They were trying to persecute Christians and erode Christianity, trying to turn America into a communist or socialist country. I shared many of these beliefs, and I knew others who also held these beliefs, and we all held them sincerely and genuinely. But I think what, again, I came to, it was liberating, but it was painful, that I came to understand is that after leaving MAGA, I did something that, well, let me backtrack. While I was going through my transition out of MAGA and my year of heaven and hell, I did something that sounds very simple, but was very life-changing and altering for me profoundly, which was I diversified my news and information sources. And after leaving MAGA, I came to conclude and better understand that there has been a multi-decade coordinated effort by the right wing, even though I'm not a great fan of the left wing, right wing terms, but there's been a coordinated effort by the right wing to demonize, dehumanize, and vilify Democrats, liberals, progressives, etc. And that propaganda and agitprop has been very consistent, very effective, and very disciplined. And I think that what Trump was able to do was he gave voice to all of the fear and the rage and paranoia that exists within the MAGA base, that there is a they who's conspiring against them. And when you leave MAGA, it's not enough to just distance yourself from the president. You have to also renounce the lies, falsehoods, and conspiracies of those, or the lies, falsehoods, and conspiracies of MAGA politics. And in addition to that, you've got to build up democracy rather than tear it down. And the way that we define that is by making the continued case that we as Americans agree more than we disagree. And if we got past the divisions and the polarization, for example, if I had a chance, Josh, to talk to those who are in MAGA, and we spoke at length and long enough, we would find that we actually have a lot of agreement and concurrence on important issues, that we do care about economic opportunity and mobility, that we care about safety and security. We want good quality health care. We want good schools for our children. I bet that we would even find common ground. All of the money that has polluted and adulterated our politics, but it's very lucrative for those who are on the MAGA media and influencer side in keeping us at each other's throats and divided. And I'm not saying that non-MAGA media doesn't divide as well, because unfortunately it does, and it's why it's important to have a diverse assortment of news and information that we consume. But the fealty to Trump is really because he's the OG originator of this community. He's the one who's given voice and has embodied the fear and the rage and the addiction that people have to believing that there are these pernicious, nefarious forces who are working as this kind of cabal against them. And more than anyone else in the modern era, Trump has been able to amplify those conspiracies and divide the country. And I personally, one of the reasons I apologize is because I was complicit and culpable in helping the president amplify conspiracies and divide the country with my writings and my podcast and my rhetoric. Yes, I may have been only one person, one voice, one vote, but I don't really look at it that way. I was part of an ecosystem that did dehumanize people who were Democrats. And I even went back to friends of mine after I left who were Democrats, and I apologized to them for lumping them into a category of existential threats. So it's really, I think, best understood to look at the multi-decade coordinated effort to vilify those who are on the left, and now we're seeing what the repercussions of what that propaganda has wrought.
I'm curious on your sense of whether you think MAGA is more of a religious movement or a political movement, and the reason I ask you that is because survey after survey, PRI puts out really, really great data. They kind of focus on there's sort of a small minority of folks that are just absolutely loyal to Trump no matter what. And some would go as far as saying, hey, we would even pick up arms, if it meant, solidifying Christianity's place in America. So we talk a lot about Christian nationalism. It's almost like in today's modern era, you can't talk about Christian nationalism without talking about Trump. And even in the time we've been talking, you've made some references, that had sort of religious overtones to them. So I'm curious, in your mind, do you get the sense a lot of MAGA followers kind of stay loyal, kind of out of the same religious sort of fealty as they would, attending a church or something like that?
I think it is similar. And one of the reasons is because people who are in MAGA, just as I did, make MAGA integral to their identity. And there's this inextricable link between people's identity, their being, and their personhood being in MAGA. And even though I wasn't the most religious person when I was in MAGA, I was around evangelicals. And I came to believe, because I allowed myself to be influenced into thinking it, that Christians were persecuted and that there was a danger to secularism. And I think that for many people who are very religious, and in particularly very religious as Christians who are in MAGA, I think it's partly because they are afraid of the they, that the perception has been created that the left wing and liberals and Democrats and leftists and progressives want to do away with Christianity and want to persecute Christians. And I feel like people who are evangelical have coalesced around that conspiracy, which explains why there is this undying devotion between Trump and the evangelical communities across the country. So I think that because of just how ingrained MAGA is in people's identities, it's why it's so hard for people to even admit that they're having doubts. For those who might see this, who are in MAGA, who are maybe having doubts, what I would tell them is that they are not alone, and that we understand what they're going through, and that we've been where they are. We have one of our leaders, Stefania. Her entree into MAGA was through her Christian nationalist church. So she always says that she was MAGA before MAGA even came on the scene. And yes, she left MAGA, and yes, she left that church. But for her, in her church, the belief was that God had sent Trump to save America. And if someone believes that, they absolutely are going to believe in that there's this shadowy group who's trying to infringe upon one's right to freely worship. But we know that upon closer inspection and scrutiny, that belief is not accurate. But if someone has convinced themselves of it, then they're going to follow Trump because he's the one who is standing between secularism and communism and socialism and godlessness. He's the one in between all of that and the evangelical Christian community.
Yeah, I have heard that narrative before, and it's very common and it's very powerful. And, I think about, so I'm going to bring out a tension that I feel because I'll just give you just a little bit of context. The mayor of Minneapolis, I don't remember his name, Frey, something like that, but yeah. So he posted like yesterday or the day before, like it was an LGBTQIA celebration at the state house or wherever it was, maybe not the state house, but the mayor's mansion or wherever. And that's, it has a right to post whatever. But I'm looking at this and, it's funny because Will and I have talked about drag queen story hour like many times. Like I would not take my kids to drag queen story hour. That's not something that would be something that I would do. And for a variety of reasons, but that doesn't mean I don't think that people that wear drag are humans, that they did that they they deserve respect, that they deserve care, love, all those things, right? That any person deserves, right? So, and I don't want to say that they're bad, right? Or anything like that. That's not really what I'm saying, but I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, I don't want what's happening with MAGA. But then on here, and basically like, and I don't know, I might be displaying my ignorance, but it seems like it was like very sexualized. There's like a lot of, like almost like grinding on like the steps and like the what is it called? Just the railings for the steps, and it's like marble steps in this beautiful mansion. Whatever, that's fine. I'm not saying. All I'm saying is I looked at it and I did not have a positive emotional reaction when I saw that. Right? I had one where it's like, that's not really what I want my kids to see. That's not really what I want my kids to be a part of. And so I see that, and then I see MAGA, and I'm like, I don't want them to be a part of MAGA. That hatred, right? That disgust that is brought out in those circles for people that are different. All of that, anyone really who's in many ways non-Christian or whatever, like there's such vitriol and anger and hatred that seems to be grown there, which is so anti-Christ in my mind. And yet then on the other side, like that does not seem like that's not celebrating my morals or the things the values that I have. And I guess I sit here and I think, I wonder how much of this, I mean, we were hitting it, but the fear of cultural collapse, the fear of, if I go to the alternative, is this what is going to happen? right? If I go is in Richmond, is it going to be drag shows in the Richmond mayor office and whatever? And again, I'm not even saying, I'm not trying to sit here and debate the objective morality of that. Although I don't think it is that great, but I'm really talking about my own emotional reactions and values, and then seeing, where do I go? Because it seems like no matter what I do, the alternatives aren't going to fit me. And maybe that's the point. But I just would love to hear your thoughts on that, because the conspiracy, you're proving these things wrong, like some of these things that are factually incorrect. But I do have concerns about the way the culture moves when the other party, so to speak, is in power. So I guess I'm kind of bringing out the tension to hear your thoughts on it, I think.
Sure. I spend a lot of time online. I always say that I'm terminally online. It's how I sometimes have found people who have left
Yes,
MAGA,
yes.
and it's also how people who have left MAGA have found us. So I spend an inordinate amount of time online, especially on social media. And there is, unfortunately, what I call amongst our team blue MAGA. And you've had on the show one of our board members, Noelle Cook, and she's our resident blue MAGA expert, where there's a conspiratorial ethos to blue MAGA, where, for example, it might be saying that that Trump didn't really win the 2024 election, for example. And I've said before online, and I've made comments respectfully to blue MAGA, which I've said, stop that. Please do not go there. We had a riot at the Capitol because the president was saying that the election was rigged, and people can debate how culpable Trump may have been in all of that, but it doesn't. But what we do know is that people believe the election was stolen,
Yes.
and committed, whether you want to call it a riot or an insurrection, they attacked the Capitol that day. So there is a blue MAGA. I wouldn't, for my kids, of all of the activities that I could do with them, I wouldn't take them to a drag show either until maybe they were of a certain age. And I don't think that they're at the age right now where I would bring them. So I think that it's a valid concern when people see individual examples of maybe something that culturally doesn't agree with them. Or culturally that they don't agree with. I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's an epidemic, but I think that for some people, we can respect their conservatism, and I don't think that conservatism writ large is entirely wrong. For example, I own a firearm. I have a concealed carry permit. Now, I think our firearm laws are probably 50 years lagging. We know that guns are a leading cause of children dying, but I'm not an anti-Second Amendment person. I have a "Don't Tread on Me" Gadsden flag. Unfortunately, it's been co-opted, but I have one. I've got that flag, and it came from a place that sells only American-made flags, so it was 100% made here. So I do think that we have to be mindful and be attuned to blue MAGA, because blue MAGA is able to amplify itself a lot online, and we don't want to become and engage in the kind of behavior that we abhor, and we see the other side on the right, or Trump or MAGA, the kind of behavior that they're engaging in.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because one of the things that I suspect are keeping people in MAGA is, and I think you alluded a little bit to it earlier, is that they don't have a place to go, right? So they're looking for community. They're looking for other people that think like them. At the moment, this MAGA community are the only ones that are doing that, but there are other people out there. And it's like, I thought a lot about this, like when Trump first got elected, the never Trumpers, because, these never Trumpers, I don't think necessarily changed their views on things like the Second Amendment, abortion, same sex marriage, all the things that made them Republican or conservative or however you want to frame it, like it's still there. It's just that they are just singularly focused on, getting Trump out of the office. So like if you are a person that joined the MAGA movement and you're like, all these issues are still important to me. It doesn't matter if Trump is saying it or Bush saying it or whoever. It's just they're still important. Like, what do you tell those folks? Like, where do they go?
One thing about Leaving MAGA that I say all the time is that we do not have an ideological purity test. Now, full disclosure and transparency, everyone who's come to Leaving MAGA has voted Democratic, including those who identify as Republican and conservative. We have some members who are Republican and were Republicans their whole adult life, and conservatives who identify as conservative, but they vote Democratic. But we don't require anyone to have to become a Democrat or a liberal or a progressive. I think purity tests cause a lot of strife and division. And if you look at the Democratic Party, purity tests have created these interminable internecine battles where everyone is at odds with each other in the Democratic Party. And I am somebody who is a very boring, squishy, centrist independent. I was a Republican under Trump, but I've been an independent for several years now. And I think most Americans are actually boring, squishy centrists. But many who are in the middle are very tuned out to our politics, but are the ones who tend to help candidates win in general elections for the most part. So I can very much sympathize with those who feel like maybe they don't want to be MAGA, but maybe they don't want to be Democrats either. And that's because, the two parties can often suck, honestly. In all truth be told,
Often doing a lot of work there.
Full disclosure, I voted Democratic in 24. I worked on Kamala's campaign. I was a co-chair of a committee in Florida. I did media on behalf of the campaign. But ultimately, as much as I might say the two parties suck, we are in a two-party system. And we have to try to land somewhere that best meets where our values are. And I feel like with MAGA, I don't think that Trump is a very honest broker, and oftentimes is insulting the intelligence of his followers, of those who are supporting him. Politicians prevaricate and exaggerate and lie sometimes, but with the president, it's established, factually accurate that there is no one who has lied more than the president has, and anyone who is that dishonest is insulting the intelligence of supporters. Pete
But
Buttigieg.
can you say that again? It's factually established that he has lied more than any president in the past.
Exactly. It's irrefutable, and Pete Buttigieg, who, whether someone likes him or not, he's got this saying that he's been mentioning in his I'm saying campaign stops. He's not a candidate yet, but he will be. But he says that Donald Trump doesn't deserve you as a voter, and that no one is good or bad based on how they vote. And I really love that message because I think that it's nonpartisan and it appeals to people across a broad and wide swath of beliefs and ideology.
Real quick comment to your point about how he feels about his voters. So I have a Truth Social account. And I recommend everybody get their own True Social account only because you need to follow what the president is doing. Because
they're going to give him so much more money because then so many more people are going to be on there.
Yeah, but it's like one of the things I like to do is when he posts something, and he posts something by this guy, I think it's John Solomon from Just News, like all the time, and he posted something recently about, I think, the election in California. And one of the things I do is I read all the articles that he posts, because I'm thinking, like, Trump doesn't read these articles, right? Like somebody gives him these articles and tell him to post it. So I read the article, and I clip the one section that makes the entire article just like completely ridiculous. So there's a line at the very bottom of this article he posted that said, "No evidence has been provided to support that the election in California, is ruined." And it's just like, all you have to do is just post that with, a screenshot of the Truth Social and be like, this is what the president wants you to believe, but he also doesn't want you to read the article, because then you'll see that he's actually basically lying to you. So, yeah, I agree with everything you said about him and his voters.
And I think actually more people in MAGA than we realize right now have privately left, are quietly having doubts. I think there are more than ever in MAGA who are experiencing the cognitive dissonance between their sincerely held beliefs and what their own eyes are showing them, and realize that there is something amiss in the country. But there's a lot of denial, because to acknowledge and honor those doubts means that someone might be mistaken. And it's an unnatural act for our Homo sapiens species to admit that we're wrong and to acknowledge the errors of our ways. And it's especially unnatural to do it publicly. But that's why we are trying at Leaving MAGA, we are trying to normalize and reduce the stigmatization of people admitting that they're wrong and acknowledging an error, because we don't believe that expressing remorse over a wrong decision makes someone weak. We think it's a show and a sign of strength and evolution and maturation. And we are trying to create the off-ramp for people who can come forward without fear of recrimination or ostracization or judgment. And it's why we spent a lot of time with our more liberal brothers and sisters in saying to them, hey, when people leave MAGA, we can either shun them or we can welcome them. And rejecting them might be the initial temptation, and I understand why, because a lot of people have been traumatized by MAGA over the last 10 plus years, and there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anger, there's people are what I call empathy exhausted. But as people are leaving MAGA, do we want to shun them, or do we want to invite them and welcome them? And if we're going to build pro-democracy coalitions and we're not going to be hypocrites about it, well, then we need to welcome everybody who wants to come into the big tent, and that includes those who leave MAGA. And even though, and I'm not trying to say that to admonish people and say, you better you better offer grace to those who leave MAGA. No, when someone's leaving MAGA, they're acknowledging their mistake and they want to repair the damage that might have been caused as a result of their support. So even though I'm not a historian, what I know about our history is that every time we have progressed and moved forward and moved beyond a crisis situation, and we are in a crisis now, the way that we've done it is by forming unlikely but necessary alliances. And I think that liberals, Democrats, progressives, and those who leave MAGA, these are alignments that we can form to push back against the administration, to win the midterms in 2026 this year, focus on, beyond November, and also don't forget about our state and local elections, because those are important also and are they arguably impact our lives even more than do national elections. But national elections are important also. We need to vote up and down the ballot. So I would ask those out there to find in themselves the forgiveness that if someone changes and seeks genuine penitence, that we offer them and extend them the grace and then welcome them into the democratic lowercase d fold.
I mean, I definitely understand that, and I agree with the attitude. We have to give people a place to land, and which is hard to do though if you still disagree with their policy and when you still disagree with, like, even vehemently with some of their issues, right? So I'm imagining myself, right, becoming part of the Democratic Party. And what would that look like? Well, it would mean that I would probably vote in a way that was not in accordance with my beliefs on probably on abortion, on maybe half and half on LGBTQ rights. I mean, I definitely, every single person deserves rights. Like, it's not even a question for me, right? So it's like the issues of same-sex marriage, the issues in Obergefell, and I have a view on that. I not only a religious view, but also a natural law view, a kind of philosophical view on that I would love if everyone agreed with. But we live in a pluralistic society, and we have to learn how to live with each other. And so it's like when it is kind of about what are we going to do? Because, Donald Trump's almost 80. He's not going to live forever. And he is supposed to be done in 3 years, right? So if he if he doesn't try to get a new term and is somehow successful with that, which, I mean, yeah, that would be kind of the end of what we understand as America, I think, if that happens at this point, if there is some kind of push in that way or success. But let's say, like, he does, right? He won't. This is his last term. He's done, but he's still going to be trying to influence politics. He is not the kind of person who's going to stop. He has loyalists. He has children, family members, and he will try to continue to insert himself into. I have zero confidence that Donald Trump will ever stop trying to run America and make it what he wants as long as he's alive. I just, miracles happen, but that would be maybe a greater miracle than than the parting of the Red Sea. I'm not going to say the resurrection. That's blasphemous. And the parting of the Red Sea, maybe that. So anyway, all I had to say, where do you see, like, how does the MAGA movement survive without Donald Trump? Can it? Do you think it will? That's kind of basically what I'm getting to as we're moving into the future. Trump's gone out of the scene. What happens to MAGA? What's going on? What do you think?
When I was in MAGA, it was a fantasy of ours to kill off the GOP and transform it into a MAGA party. And that has been achieved and accomplished. So when Trump is out of office, for exactly, Josh, the reasons that you're saying, MAGA might weaken slightly, but it's going to remain. It's one of our two major parties right now. It's called the Republican Party, but that's just in name only. It's truly the MAGA party. And I think what will happen, though, is when Trump is out of office, I do think there are going to be more MAGA Americans who are going to find themselves maybe questioning or doubting because Trump is not there, because he might be present, but he's not in a position of actual presidential power. And if people find themselves at a crossroads, the good news is that we're able to try to catch them. And that's where I hope Leaving MAGA is going to become even busier than we are right now, which is catching people who are going to say, I was MAGA all this time. Trump's not here anymore. I've started to go through a personal introspection, and I'm more closely examining my beliefs, and I'm realizing that maybe I don't agree with a lot of these beliefs that I held. And it will be a way for us to present an alternative for people to leave, not to necessarily become a Democrat or vote Democratic, but have them have an outlet where they have the exit ramp and the off ramp. I don't think that MAGA will go away after Trump is out of office. I think that it's too strong. It's too prevalent. It's had enough time to grow itself. I think it's a little bit of a political hydra. It's multi-headed, and there are lots of MAGA influencers and figures, the ones you point out, Josh, the family in particular, who are going to satiate and satisfy the hydra. So it's not going to go away. But I'd like to think that Leaving MAGA is at the vanguard of all of this, and that we're going to be able to show people a pathway out of MAGA when they start to have doubts, and show them that they're not alone, and that it's okay to admit that they're wrong, and it's okay to question their belief system. And that's how we make progress. It's by people re-examining their views and changing their minds. If we look at our history, whatever the important issue, whether it's the abolition of slavery, Reconstruction, women's suffrage, even, civil rights, voting rights, even marriage equality, it all happened because people changed their minds. So I'd like to think that even though my story and the story of others who left are cautionary tales, we're living proof that people can change. And it's why I think we shouldn't give up on our MAGA friends and relatives. And we can have good faith debates about abortion and the death penalty and, trans rights, for example. People can have disagreements that aren't rooted in malice and aren't rooted in overtly trying to take people's rights away. But the only way we can really experience good faith debates is by people having conversations that and are kept in a shared reality. Unfortunately, with MAGA, there is so much mis and disinformation within MAGA that we're not sharing a reality with people who are in MAGA. There's not a fact-based, we don't have a fact-based consensus. And I'm not saying that other groups aren't information siloed, but MAGA is the most information siloed group in the country. And I can attest to that because I was in it for 7 years. Any information that even remotely refuted the pervasively held beliefs and mythologies of MAGA, it was shunned. It was kept out. For me, my media diet, it was entirely MAGA media. It was the media that I wrote for. And it was also sites like Breitbart.com. I lived on Breitbart's site. I consumed that website and its content voraciously. I lived in the comment section. So I think that there's a crisis level right now in our country of mis and disinformation, and it's fed by what I call the United States of algorithms. So we have to gently push back on the algorithms and recognize all of us to some extent have become addicted to and our worldview shaped by these algorithms, including especially those who are in MAGA.
That's so, it's so true. Like we do live in this like perpetual state of algorithms, which I posted something the other day that said, the new currency in America is basically like, shares, and subscribe, right? So like if you are looking around and you're wishing that your fellow neighbor and friends were a little bit smarter or knew the things that you knew, like share the things that you you actually watch, subscribe. Like I don't know how many times I get, stuff that's just liked and not shared. And this sounds like a total first world problem that I'm talking about, but I want to end our conversation by talking to you about these billboards that I'm seeing put up everywhere. It's like I can't scroll social media without seeing one of your billboards, which is great. But I want to just learn a little bit more about what the billboards are, what are you hoping to accomplish, and what kind of feedback are you getting?
I have to say, I underestimated how much people would love billboards. We had several months ago some local citizens in Pennsylvania put up some billboards, and it generated a lot of local buzz. It generated local media attention. And I slowly started to have the idea, thinking, okay, people seem to like these billboards. Where can we start putting them up? And we have now put them up in a total of 18 states. We are across lots of different cities, ranging from Tulsa to Nashville to Phoenix. We've got several in Florida, including 2 that are mere miles from Mar-a-Lago. We have one that went up in the Villages, which is what, as we joke in Florida, Disneyland for senior citizens. It's a census designated area for senior citizens. We put one up there. We've got one going up in Times Square very soon as well. That's going to be going up. And yes, there are metrics that we looked at to gauge their success, such as media attention, especially earned media, engagement on our social media and content, fundraising. But the most important metric that we look at is how many people, as a result of the billboards who are in MAGA, reach out to us. And we have had more people in MAGA than ever, because of the billboards, contact us saying, I'm in MAGA. I don't know what to do. I'm having doubts. Please help me. So that metric, which is most significant and relevant to us, we are seeing it happen. So we want people who see the boards to know, just like it says on the billboard, the message is having doubts, you're not alone. We want them to know you're not alone. You have support and resources with our organization where you can turn to and meet not just like-minded people, but people who went through the odyssey of leaving MAGA. And just like my epiphany, which, to paraphrase the late Venerable Hemingway, happened gradually and then suddenly all at once, I think that's the kind of exodus we're going to see out of MAGA, which is going to be slowly and then suddenly all at one time, where we're going to have a deluge of people who are going to be coming to us. And we have built our infrastructure as an organization to be able to handle a massive amount of people coming to us. And so the billboards are really designed to spread the word of what we're doing, let people know in red areas that we exist. Even though some of the billboards are in areas where there are a lot of blue voters, what people don't really realize is when we look at places like Nashville or Tulsa, we're in Shreveport, Louisiana, in Mike Johnson's district. We put a board there. Even in blue areas, there are lots of red voters. And so we're not ignoring the blue voters, because those are friends and relatives who can tap into our support group we do every Tuesday. But we're really looking to appeal to those red voters who right now might be saying, I'm not sure about MAGA. This isn't exactly the movement that I thought I was supporting. I'm starting to question it. And the billboards will show them that they have a place to come to.
Oh, sorry about that. And where can people find you? Leaving MAGA.
So anyone who wants to socials, subscribe to our newsletter, contact us. I do read all the messages that come in. Where you can read the testimonials of others who have left MAGA as well. People can find us at leavingmaga.org. Reach out to us there. Drop us a note or a question or a comment. Again, we do read all of them, so people can find us at leavingmaga.org.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Rich, for stopping by. This has been a really, really good conversation.
No, it's my pleasure, guys. Thank you for taking an interest in what we're doing, and for your and for this. I found this conversation to be very enlightening and very challenging, which is, I think, the best kinds of conversations. So thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, we are super happy. And to our audience, hey, thanks again for stopping by. And as always, make sure you keep your conversations not right or left, but up. And we'll see you next time. Take care.